The Democratic side has 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. President, I wanted to respond and speak as to why I am in opposition to the Blunt Amendment, which requires a point of order for a carbon tax. The scientific community is not in debate. The scientific community tells us that climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is caused by a very significant increase in carbon emissions. The scientific community tells us that climate change is already causing devastating problems in our nation and around the world. And what the scientific community tells us, if we do not, as a planet, not just the United States, China, Russia, India, the entire world, if we do not get our act together, the planet that we're going to be leaving for our kids and grandchildren will be substantially less habitable than the planet that we enjoy. We have a moral responsibility to respond to this crisis, and we have to use every tool that we can in our arsenal. What does that mean? It means we need to invest heavily in weatherization, in energy efficiency, so we don't waste energy. It means we have to move aggressively toward wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, and other sustainable energies. It also means that we have to say to those people who are producing carbon in significant amounts, who are causing the problem, you know what, they cannot continue to do that with impunity. They're going to have to pay a tax on that. So we can argue about how we go forward in transforming our energy system, how we cut carbon pollution, but we should not pick out one particular approach and say that it's going to require 60 votes to go forward. So I strongly object to Senator Blunt's amendment. What we will be doing is offering a side-by-side, and this side-by-side could not be simpler. The American people, the scientific community, are pretty clear that climate change is in fact real and that it is caused by human activity. And what we will do is offer a side-by-side to establish a deficit-neutral reserve fund to recognize that climate change is real, is caused by human activity, and that Congress needs to take action to cut carbon pollution. Now, what is happening all over this country is young people want action, and while many of my Republican colleagues refuse to acknowledge the reality that climate change is caused by human activity, outside of Capitol Hill, many Republicans, in fact, do understand that. We have prominent conservative economists and economic advisors, like Nobel laureate economist Gary Becker, Mitt Romney's former economic advisor Gregory Mankiw, and former Reagan advisor Art Laffer, have all called for taxing carbon. Not a radical idea. These are conservative Republicans who understand that people who are causing the problem can't do that with impunity. Just more recently, George Shultz, I think we all know who George Shultz is, the former Secretary of the Treasury and Secretary of State under Presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, published an op-ed in the Washington Post calling for a carbon tax. So the idea of a carbon tax is something that is gaining more and more support from Democrats, Republicans, independents, people who are very worried about what is happening to our environment. So, Mr. President, in terms of the side-by-side, I personally am strongly opposed to Senator Blunt's amendment, which just looks at a tax on carbon. And I should tell you that is a co-author along with Senator Boxer with regard to a carbon tax. We put huge amounts of money into helping those families who might see higher utility bills. That's probably the main source of funding allocation. So we are aware of the problem and we address it in our legislation, and it should be addressed in any legislation. But once again, in terms of the side-by-side, we are going to give our Republican colleagues an opportunity.
Senator from Oregon.
President, I ask unanimous consent to set aside the pending amendment and call up my amendment 434.
Is there objection? Without objection, the clerk will report by number.
Mr. President, I ask
Senator from
unanimous-
Oregon, Mr. Wyden, proposes an amendment numbered 434.